Now let's turn to leadership in Africa, where the continent remains the least developed continent in the world. Its problems ranges from hunger, poverty, terrorism, local ethnic and religious conflicts, corruption and bribery, disease outbreaks, and this was Africa's story until the early 2000s. The leader helps them to establish goals and then guides them through the whole process, allowing the community to be effective. Africa has also experienced dictatorship in areas of leadership. Idi Amin, Mobutu Sese Seko, those opposed to them were killed. One of the most pressing challenges African states faced at independence was their lack of infrastructure. European imperialists prided themselves on bringing civilization and developing Africa, but they left their former colonies with little in the way of infrastructure. Former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Africa Affairs, Ambassador Herman Cohen, joins me to discuss more on Africa's challenges. Good to have you join us, Ambassador Cohen.
Thank you. Glad to be here. So
it looks like you wrote a book on this, and the mind of the African strongman, conversations with dictators, statesmen, and father figures. And in this book, you sought to find out why the initial enthusiasm that accompanied independence in Africa quickly went so badly awry. What did you find out in your search?
Well, at the beginning, when independence took place, the new African leaders said, well, what should our policy be, especially in the economy? And they had friends in England and France who were mainly socialists. And in those days, in the early 1960s, the French and the British were nationalizing their industries, the coal mines, the banks, the insurance company. So they said to the African leaders, nationalize everything, plantations, factories, insurance company, banks. So the African leaders, having a lot of respect for their former colonial partners, did that. But instead of running these enterprises as profit-making enterprises, they opened it up to vast employment. They hired lots of people from the rural areas asking for jobs. So that as a result, many of these state-owned enterprises were losing money. And this took money away from healthcare, from infrastructure maintenance, from defense and education. So the initial policies of the African leaders tended to cause the economies to go downhill. That's why there's not much infrastructure built up over the years. It's all changing now. And things, with a new generation of leaders, more good things are being done in education. For example, the president of the Congo recently said all elementary school education will be totally free. This is a major development in an African country where you don't have to pay tuition for elementary school. So I think the initial mistakes were not the fault of the African leaders. It was a question of culture and following the wrong advice from the Europeans.
One of the things that also accompanied independence was military coups. We saw the very first military coup in Africa in Togo in 1963, just 3 years after the country had independence. And we've continued to experience military coups in Africa, just recently in Mali. And people blame that on corruption and incompetent leaders. Does Africa really need the strong man, as you call them in your book, to ensure that we have the right form of government or governance in the continent?
Well, unfortunately, corruption has been a major factor since independence of African countries. The initial leaders built up these political parties as their support in the countryside. Well, a lot of revenue coming from exports, like for iron ore, for copper, for oil, instead of going into the budget for education and health and what have you, a lot of it went into these political parties. And being an official in a political party became a career. And in many countries, you had thousands of people working for the political party. And this is, in effect, corruption. I'm paying off my political party in order to stay in power. And I think this is one of the factors that caused Africa to develop much more slowly, say, than Southeast Asia.
And some countries, are still developing more than others because of military interventions in some of these countries. We've also seen insecurity in most parts of Africa, especially in the in the western part of Africa. What do you think that the African Union can do? Because there is also the situation in Chad. What do you think that the African Union can do to prevent military coups and the legitimation of military regimes?
Well, I think I give a lot of credit to the African Union over the last 15 years. Whenever there's been a military coup in Africa, the African Union has come in and said, this is illegal. You shouldn't be doing military coups. If you have problems, do it through parliament. Do it through the democratic process. And the African Union has been fairly successful in requiring military leaders to step down and turn power over to civilians. I remember in Guinea, back in the year 2005, there was the president died, Lansana Conté, and the militaries took over without allowing the president of the National Assembly under the Constitution to have taken over. Well, the African Union came in and said, this is illegal. You must not do that. Well, the military said, okay, we're out. We'll turn power over to civilians. So I think I give a lot of credit to the African Union. I think they're doing a good job in promoting democracy and discouraging military coups.
You spoke to several African leaders, whether democratically elected leaders or military leaders who took over through coups. Most of them were revolutionists in their days, but things went south when they took power. Now, Africa is still known as the least developed continent, the continent with hunger, with poverty. Things are changing quite all right. But what more do you think that Africa needs to do to change that narrative and reposition the continent?
Well, I would say they need to put in place structures which will make sure that the money that is earned through exports or through other means goes into the budget. I remember in the Congo, for example, the major earner of revenue is copper. And they have a national copper company called Gécamine. I have talked to people in the treasury, in the Congo treasury, who said that, 60% of our earnings from copper do not go into the budget. They go into the political party or into the leadership. So each government should put in structures, just like we have in the United States, very tight controls, make sure that all of the earnings from exports or for other reasons goes into the budget so that Parliament and the budget committees and the president and his people can allocate that money for the use of the people. And I don't see that yet in too many countries. I see it in Ghana a bit. I see it in Cote d'Ivoire. I see it in South Africa and in Botswana. But it's a minority of countries that are doing that.
Ambassador Herman Cohen, I know that you continue to engage with the continent, and as you do, we will continue to engage with you to just learn about Africa from you, who is a foreigner and who lived in Africa also for years. Ambassador Herman Cohen, thanks for talking to us as always.
You're very welcome. I enjoyed that.